Hello, BookTube, and welcome to day 4 of LitMas. That's an epic BookTube event created by the guys at Stripcover Lit and featuring, for the 2 weeks before Christmas, a fascinating prompt every day. And today's prompt, I knew was going to come because I watched their channel, so I had a feeling. And today is the best poem that you encountered in 2018. And this presents problems for me because I recognize in 2018 I have come to recognize a reading blind spot. I hunt for my reading blind spots all the time when I can, and clearly contemporary poetry written by poets who are still alive, is such a blind spot. I have a kind of reflexive contempt for it because of its abuses, because of what I would consider, I would hope, would be very bad examples. People who have elevated incomprehensibility into a shtick and dare you to call them out on it. And I have to assume that that is not most contemporary poets. If I'm going to conduct, I think, in 2019, I'm going to conduct an extensive re-education campaign of myself and you along the way, dragging you along, in which I seek out contemporary poets whose work I can learn to like. I don't require them to write in a way that pleases me. I will meet them halfway. I've already learned that some of it is possible. I've been making comments to this effect on this channel for a couple of weeks now, and people have pointed out not only little bits and pieces alluded to in contemporary poems that I didn't understand, actual factual things that I didn't understand that do add credence to the construction of the poem, but also, as Peg rather gently pointed out, maybe I could be a little bit more flexible when it comes to imagery and symbolic language, and I will do that. I will take that all into account in the new year. But as it is now on Litmas Day 4, I am hopelessly behind the curve for making the poem that I would talk about today something that I actually encountered for the first time in 2018. That would be tough. I've read a lot of poetry, and the poem, in order to be scrupulously loyal to this question, I think I would have to pick a poem and recite something that I wasn't beginning to understand. Fortunately, I have a way out. Because a little earlier, the New Yorker brought out an archival issue. That is an old cover of the New Yorker. It's beautiful. And almost everything in the issue is old. Archival cartoons, archival articles, and also, much to my delight, archival poetry. So I thought that since I was encountering these things, I did encounter these things in 2018. I thought that's what we would do today. And once again, I'm cheating because once again I cannot narrow this down to just one poem. Instead, I'm going to read you two. I'm going to read you two poems. One, the first poem that we'll read is by, I don't know anything about contemporary poetry. I don't know anything about 21st century poetry. I will learn. I know a lot about 20th century poetry, no matter what poets might say otherwise. I've known a lot of 20th century poets. I've read all their work. I've read critical studies. So I'm not quite so deferential or apologetic when it comes to 20th century poetry. And both the poets that I'm going to read you now are in this issue, and both of them are great 20th century poets. The one that I'm going to read you first was the greatest 20th century poet until she was replaced by the person that I will read you second. So, the first poem is by Marianne Moore, and it's called Granite and Steel, and it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be one of the most beautiful poems written to an ugly, totally quotidian, practical thing. I believe some poet way back in ye olden days wrote a poem about a louse that was astonishingly beautiful. This is along those same lines. We'll see if you can guess in the course of the poem what the poem is about. It's called Granite and Steel. Enfranchising cable, silvered by the sea, of woven wire grayed by the mist, and liberty dominate the bay. Her feet, as one on shattered chains, once whole links wrought by tyranny. Caged Circe of steel and stone, her parent German ingenuity. O catenary curve, from tower to pier, implacable enemy of the mind's deformity, of man's uncompunctious greed, his crass love of crass priority, just recently obstructing acquiescent feet about to step ashore when darkness fell without a cause, as if probity had not joined our cities in the sea. O path amid the stars, crossed by the seagull's wing, O radiance that doth inherit me, affirming, interacting harmony. Untried expedient, untried, then tried. Sublime, elliptic, twofold egg, way out, way in. Romantic passageway, first seen by the eye of the mind, then by the eye. O steel, O stone. Climactic ornament, double rainbow, as if inverted by French perspicacity. John Roebling's monument, German tenacities also. Composite span, and actuality. And John Roebling's name may tip off to some of you that poem is actually about the Brooklyn Bridge. And yet, it is a perfect example of Marianne Moore's controlled ecstasy, the thing that made her beloved and such, totally forgotten now, or almost, except in poetry reading circles, but once upon a time, the absolute guiding wisdom of an age. And the mentor to dozens and dozens of younger poets, including our next poet, who supplanted Marianne Moore and is the best poet of the 20th century. And this is a long poem. I'm not going to read all of it. It's in 3 segments. I'll skip the middle one because I don't want to bore you with my bad poetry reading too much. But this is called At the Fish Houses. It's from 1955, when the whole world made sense. Although it is a cold evening, down by one of the fish houses, an old man sits netting his net. In the gloaming, almost invisible, a dark purple-brown, and his shuttle worn and polished. The air smells so strong of codfish it makes one's nose run and one's eyes water. The 5 fish houses have steepled, peaked roofs and narrow, cleated gangplanks slant up to the storerooms in the gables, for the wheelbarrows to be pushed up and down on. All is silver. The heavy surface of the sea, swelling slowly as if considering spilling over, is opaque, but the silver of the benches, the lobster pots, the masts, scattered among the wild, jagged rocks, as is of an apparent translucence, like the small buildings with an emerald moss growing on their shoreward walls. The big fish tubs are completely lined with layers of beautiful herring scales, and the wheelbarrows are similarly plastered with creamy, iridescent coats of mail, with small, iridescent flies crawling on them. Up on the little slope behind the houses, set in the sparse, bright sprinkle of grass, is an ancient wooden capstan, cracked with 2 long bleached handles and some melancholy stains like dried blood where the ironwork has rusted. Down at the water's edge, we'll skip that part. Cold, dark, deep, and absolutely clear, element bearable to no mortal, to fish, to seals. One seal particularly I have seen here evening after evening. He was curious about me. He was interested in music, like me, a believer in total immersion. So I used to sing him Baptist hymns. I sang him "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." He stood up in the water and regarded me steadily, moving his head a little. Then he would disappear, then suddenly emerge almost in the same spot, with a sort of shrug, as if it were just against his better judgment. Cold, dark, deep, and absolutely clear. The clear, gray, icy water. Back, behind us, the dignified tall firs begin. Bluish, associating with their shadows, a million Christmas trees stand waiting for Christmas. The water seems suspended above the round gray and blue-gray stones. I have seen it over and over, the same sea, the same, slightly indifferently swinging above the stones. Icily free from the stones, above the stones, and then the world. If you should dip your hand in, your wrist would ache immediately. Your bones would begin to ache, and your hand would burn as if the water were a transmutation of fire that feeds on stones and burns with a dark gray flame. If you tasted it, it would first taste bitter, then briny, then surely burn your tongue. It is like what we imagine knowledge to be, dark, salt, clear, moving, utterly free, drawn from the cold, hard mouth of the world, derived from the rocky breasts forever, flowing and drawn, and since our knowledge is historical, flowing and flown. That likewise does what we want poets to do. We want them to take something like the Brooklyn Bridge or fish houses on an ice covered lake and transmute them into something immortal. And that was by Elizabeth Bishop, and that is my cheat for this day of Litmas. These are not new poems, and I have encountered both of them before, but in a way I did encounter them in 2018 because I did not know that this issue of the New Yorker was going to be an archival issue. I thought I was going to open it and read the same old stuff, and instead I opened it and started encountering the very first thing that I noticed. I started encountering cartoons that I know like the back of my hand instead of new cartoons. And then I started encountering classic pieces. And then I encountered these poems. So it was an encounter in 2018. It was unexpected. It just wasn't brand new. And that's my litmus for today. I will try not to cheat so bad tomorrow, but we'll see. I don't know what tomorrow's prompt is. I'm not testing myself. But I'll wrap this up, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.